Wendell Arden Grissom was executed by lethal injection on March 20, 2025, at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, USA. He was sentenced to death for the murder of Amber Matthews in 2005 during a home invasion and robbery. Oklahoma, a state in America, presents a picture of stark contradictions. It is a place of vast fields stretching to the horizon where the expansive sky can suddenly give birth to devastating tornadoes. It is also a land of deep religious faith and tight-knit small communities where life seems to flow at a peaceful rhythm, seemingly unshakable. Yet it is within this tranquility that violence sometimes erupts with the most sudden and brutal force. The story of Wendell Arden Grissom is not just an ordinary criminal case. It is like a tornado that swept away the peace of the small town of Watonga, leaving behind a scene of spiritual devastation and exposing the deep cracks in the very foundation of the justice system. The American criminal justice system is built on two inviolable pillars, actus reus and mens rea. A crime is only considered complete when both the act and the intent are present. This is a principle that has been tested over centuries, forming the basis for the concept of the guilty mind, the idea that an offender must have the capacity for understanding and conscious choice. However, what happens when the guilty mind itself is a mind that is damaged, biologically flawed? As modern neuroscience reveals the secrets of how the brain works, do classical legal definitions still have the power to explain the most complex human behaviors? The Grissom case became a harsh test for these very principles, a prolonged confrontation between the stark reality of violence and the complex truth of a malfunctioning brain. Night fell over Blaine County, carrying the characteristic chill of an Oklahoma autumn. Inside an old car, Wendell Arden Grissom and his accomplice, Jesse Floyd Johns, were wandering aimlessly. Perhaps they were drunk, their minds hazy from alcohol, and the simmering desperation of lives with no escape. Their conversation was likely just disjointed sentences about money, about being stuck. Then a decision was made, one that seemed minor random at the time, but was the beginning of an irreversible tragedy. They chose a house for no particular reason other than it looked quiet and easy to enter. They did not know, and likely did not care, that this decision would put an end to one life and destroy countless others. Inside the house, Amber Dawn Matthews, 23, and her friend Drew Kopf were probably getting the children ready for bed. The atmosphere in the home was warm and peaceful, filled with the familiar sounds of a happy family. The giggles of children, the soft footsteps on the wooden floor, the gentle music from the television all created a perfect picture of serenity. Then a strange noise shattered the silence, the sound of the back door being violently forced open. Initial disbelief quickly turned into sheer terror as the two women came face to face with two strangers armed with weapons. In that chaotic moment, the mother's instinct in Drew Kopf exploded. All thoughts, all fears, coalesced into a single objective: protect the children. She grabbed them, trying to run towards the door, desperately seeking an escape. That's when the first shots rang out, deafening, brutal, tearing through the quiet night air. Pain like a knife cut through her body as bullets pierced her chest, back, and arm. Bright red blood splattered, staining the pristine white walls. But the will to survive, fueled by sacred maternal love, was stronger than the excruciating pain. With a phenomenal effort, she kept moving, dragging her blood-soaked body through the darkness, across the seemingly endless distance, to a neighbor's house. When she finally managed to call for help, she collapsed, but she had completed the most sacred mission of her life, saving her two innocent children. While one mother was fighting for her life, another tragedy was unfolding in deadly silence. Grissom, instead of fleeing with his accomplice, walked deeper into the house. He moved through the rooms with a chilling coldness, and in a small bedroom he found Amber Matthews. She was hiding in a dark corner, cowering in fear, completely helpless before the intruder. There was no resistance. No words were exchanged. There was only the heavy, menacing silence between predator and prey. In that fateful moment, with an incomprehensible decision, Grissom raised his gun and fired a single shot at close range. It was a cold, decisive, and utterly senseless act. It turned a terrible robbery into an execution, an act that the prosecution would later describe as the clearest evidence of a calculated, guilty mind. When the first responders arrived at the scene, they were met with a horrific sight that would haunt them for the rest of their lives: a severely injured woman gasping for breath in a pool of blood, 2 children screaming in panic, and another woman lying dead in the small bedroom. The peace of Watonga had been stained with blood and tears. Grissom and Johns fled in the victim's car, but their freedom was short-lived. The investigation was launched with the utmost urgency. Detectives from the County Sheriff's Office and the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, OSBI, worked tirelessly like patient hunters, gathering every piece of evidence. From the faint fingerprints on the doorknob, to the shell casings on the floor, from the dried blood on the walls, to the fabric fibers caught on a tree branch, every detail was documented, analyzed, and pieced into the overall puzzle of the case. Drew Kopp's testimony, though difficult due to her severe injuries, provided invaluable details about the appearance and actions of the 2 perpetrators. Just a few days later, the stolen car was found abandoned. With irrefutable forensic evidence, fingerprints, DNA, and witness testimony, the identities of the 2 culprits were determined. The manhunt ended quickly, and Grissom was arrested, facing the full weight of the law. To understand why a person could commit such a crime, we must step back and look at the life that shaped the perpetrator. The life of Wendell Arden Grissom is a case study of systemic societal failure. Born in Fort Cobb, Oklahoma, amidst the economic hardships of the 1970s and 1980s in rural America, Grissom faced disadvantages from his earliest days. It was a difficult time for this region. Schools were underfunded, job opportunities were scarce, and access to mental health services was virtually non-existent. Modern developmental psychology tells us that the early years are crucial for the formation of neural connections, especially in the frontal lobe, the area known as the executive director of the brain. Emotional deprivation, chronic stress, and possible childhood trauma contributed to a vulnerable brain. Dropping out of school was not the cause, but merely a symptom of a much deeper problem. Pushed to the margins of society, lacking the necessary skills to integrate, Grissom found temporary solace in alcohol and drugs. It was a misguided form of self-medication, a desperate attempt to quiet the storms in his mind. But instead of bringing relief, they only made things worse, further eroding his judgment and pushing him into a dangerous spiral of criminal behavior. The nonviolent offenses on his record were like ignored alarm bells, warning signs of a person hurtling uncontrollably towards tragedy. The 2008 trial at the Blaine County Courthouse was a dramatic legal play. Selecting a jury for a case that could result in the death penalty was a tense process aimed at finding citizens willing to bear the heaviest responsibility in the legal system. In the opening statements, the prosecution painted a dark but clear picture. This was a story of pure evil. They portrayed Grissom as a cold-blooded predator who made a calculated decision to silence a witness. According to them, the shooting of Amber Matthews was not an emotional outburst, but a cold calculation to cover up a crime. In contrast, the defense tried to sow a seed of doubt, not about the act, which was undeniable, but about the intent behind it. They spoke of a life full of hardship, of the influence of alcohol and drugs, and hinted at an unstable mind incapable of making rational decisions. The centerpiece of the trial was the testimony of Drew Kopp. When she took the witness stand, the entire courtroom fell into absolute silence. She recounted her story in detail, her voice sometimes breaking with emotion, but never wavering. She described every moment of that horrific night, from the sound of the door being broken down, to the first shots, from the excruciating pain to the powerful will to survive. Most importantly, she looked directly at Grissom as she described his actions. Her testimony was not just legal evidence, it was a vivid experience, a painful reminder of the price of violence. Forensic experts later reinforced her story with cold scientific facts explaining how fingerprints, ballistics, and DNA irrefutably linked Grissom to the scene. In the closing arguments, both sides delivered powerful speeches. The prosecutor once again reiterated the brutality of the crime, the innocence of the victim, and asked the jury to deliver the strictest justice. The defense attorney, in a final effort to save his client's life, pleaded for mercy, asking the jury to look at Grissom's entire life, not just his worst act. The jury, after careful deliberation, sided with the prosecution. They found that Grissom's actions fully met the definition of first-degree murder with malice aforethought. The decision to recommend the death penalty was made based on the evidence presented before them. They did not know and could not have known that a crucial piece of the puzzle was missing. The years following the trial were a tiresome journey through the labyrinth of the appellate system. Appeals were repeatedly denied, and it seemed all roads led to a foregone conclusion. But then Grissom's new legal team turned over a stone that no one had turned before. A comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation revealed a shocking truth: Grissom suffered from severe brain atrophy in his frontal lobe. This was not an abstract theory or a medical guess. CT and MRI scans clearly showed physical damage to the region of the brain considered the control center for behavior. Experts explained that the frontal lobe is the executive director of the brain. It allows us to think about the consequences of our actions, restrain immediate impulses, and understand and adhere to social rules. When this area is damaged or atrophied, a person's control is severely impaired, like a car with broken brakes going downhill. This new evidence was not only scientifically significant, but also had profound legal implications. It became the centerpiece of the final clemency petition, raising a fundamental question: can a person with a physically damaged brain be held fully morally responsible in the same way as a person with a healthy brain? The case became even more complex when several members of the original jury, after being informed of the new evidence, signed sworn affidavits. They admitted that knowledge of his brain condition might have changed their decision. It was a stunning admission, a crack in the certainty of the original verdict. The clemency hearing in Oklahoma was the final legal battle in a war that had lasted over 2 decades. On one side were the lawyers armed with powerful scientific evidence and the regret of former jurors. On the other side was the state of Oklahoma, represented by the Attorney General, who steadfastly argued that justice demanded the ultimate punishment. The defense attorneys presented a complete picture of Grissom's brain condition, explaining how it affected his decision-making and behavioral control. They did not deny the crime, but pleaded for an understanding of the factors that contributed to it. However, in a state with a strong tradition of supporting the death penalty, the outcome was almost predetermined. The Pardon and Parole Board voted against recommending clemency, and the governor declined to intervene. All legal avenues were exhausted. On March 20th, 2025, the final day of execution arrived. The last 24 hours of Grissom's life passed in a prescribed ritual of death row. There were final meetings with a chaplain, a final simple meal, and perhaps moments of reflection on the life that had passed. He was said to have appeared calm, a strange serenity in the face of death. Perhaps it was a final acceptance, or perhaps just the numbness of a mind that had been through too much. When he was brought into the execution chamber, he was offered a last meal of a chicken-fried steak, mashed potatoes with gravy, a cheeseburger with fries and ketchup pinto beans, a hot roll, and a Coca-Cola from the prison canteen. Grissom faced the witnesses through the thick glass. In his final words, he did not beg for his life. Instead, he offered an apology, a simple but profound confession. "I was drunk, I was on drugs, I was out of my mind." It was a statement that could be interpreted in many different ways: a belated excuse, a stark truth from a broken mind, or perhaps both. The lethal injection process was carried out quickly and quietly. At 10:13 a.m., Wendell Arden Grissom died. Among the witnesses present, Drew Kopf, the sole survivor from that horrific night in 2005, later stated that she believed his apology was sincere. However, she added that it could not heal anything, could not bring Amber back, could not erase the painful memories. This event sent widespread ripples. Religious leaders like Archbishop Paul S. Coakley spoke out strongly, calling the death penalty a failure of human compassion and the capacity for forgiveness. The Grissom case ultimately leaves us not with a sense of satisfied justice, but with a deep sense of unease. It is a painful reminder that our legal system, though designed to seek the truth, is sometimes ill-equipped to understand the most complex truths about the brain and the human mind. This story highlights an ongoing crisis in the modern justice system. As neuroscience reveals more secrets about how the brain works, we must face difficult questions about personal responsibility and social justice. Can a person with a damaged brain be considered fully morally culpable? How do we balance science and justice, understanding and punishment? The Grissom case shows that our legal system is still struggling to integrate the latest scientific discoveries into its decision-making processes. This does not mean we should ignore personal responsibility or not punish crime, but rather that we need to develop more sophisticated approaches to understanding and responding to criminal behavior. Beyond the questions of individual responsibility, this case also exposes the profound failures of social support systems. Grissom's life was a series of missed opportunities, from the failure to diagnose and treat his early developmental issues to the lack of intervention programs for high-risk individuals. If the warning signs had been identified and addressed in time, could this tragedy have been prevented? This is not a futile hypothetical question, but a reminder of the importance of investing in education, mental health care, and social programs that can prevent crime before it happens. While we debate the legal and scientific aspects, we must not forget those who suffered real loss. Amber Matthews's family lost a daughter, a sister, a friend. Drew Kopf must live with physical and mental scars for the rest of her life. 2 children witnessed images that no child should ever see. For them, debates about the brain and responsibility may seem distant and academic. Their pain is real, immediate, and undeniable. Any discussion of justice must begin with acknowledging and respecting that pain. The Grissom case teaches us about the complexity of human beings and the limitations of the systems we create to deal with bad behavior. It shows that, first, we need a more holistic approach to crime, one that focuses not only on punishment, but also on prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation. Second, the justice system needs to be updated to reflect the latest understandings of the brain and human behavior while still maintaining the fundamental principles of accountability and justice. Third, we need to invest more in mental health services, especially for vulnerable and disadvantaged groups. As we move forward, the Grissom case will continue to be a crucial reference point in discussions about the intersection of science and law. It raises questions we cannot ignore. How do we balance empathy for those with damaged brains with justice for their victims? How do we use scientific knowledge to improve the justice system without undermining the concept of personal responsibility? How do we build a society that is capable of preventing tragedies like this? The story of Wendell Arden Grissom is not a story of pure evil triumphing or justice being perfectly served. It is a complex, multi-layered tragedy, a tragedy of society's failure to protect its most vulnerable members, of the limits of human understanding, and of the challenges of achieving true justice in a world that is anything but simple. While we cannot change the past, we can learn from it. We can strive to build a justice system that is both fair and compassionate, both scientifically informed and respectful of human dignity. We can work to create a society where people like Grissom are helped before they cause harm, and where people like Amber Matthews are protected from senseless violence. That is perhaps the best way to honor the memory of those who were lost, and to bring meaning to the suffering we have witnessed. In the end, justice is not just about punishing wrongdoers. It is also about creating a world where such wrongs are less likely to happen.